You're listening to Serva Soundbites, the official podcast of Serva, the leading global relocation and moving services company. Are you ready? Let's get started with today's episode. New year, new workforce. Top talent mobility trends for 2026.
Welcome to Serva Soundbites, where we aim to connect, inform, educate, and entertain our listeners. I'm Kate Rothwell, a Director of Global Advisory Services at Serva. Welcome to our New Year edition, New Year, New Workforce, Top Talent Mobility for 2026. As we move into 2026, organizations are navigating significant shifts in workforce expectations, mobility formats, skills demands, and the accelerating impact of AI on roles and decision-making. These developments, alongside evolving internal mobility patterns and broader geopolitical considerations, are reshaping how companies think about talent deployment and workforce planning. I'm pleased to be joined today by Hannah Richardson, SVP of Global Strategic Services. Welcome back, Hannah, and let's jump into what's driving these changes and what leaders need to pay attention to in 2026.
Oh, thanks so much, Kate. And it's a real pleasure to be back again. And I thought maybe before we dive into what we're sort of seeing for the year ahead in 2026, it might be just worthwhile having a recap of where we were this time last year when we were looking at the trends for 2025 and what's happened since then. But if we just sort of start with where we are today, so much has already happened in the world in 2026, especially on the geopolitical platform. But as we kind of cast our mind back over the last 12 months, we were here discussing navigating the transition from traditional HR practices towards a more globally focused workforce approach. And this really is talking, in essence, to the shift from traditional HR through to strategic workforce management and planning. Gartner called out that, around 15% of organizations back in 2025 were considering or had already made that shift to strategic workforce. And we see many more of our clients on that journey too. We also looked at exploring, wider solutions for workforce mobility. We've all grown up with the very traditional packages of long-term assignments, short-term assignments. But what became really clear in 2026 was this growing rise in the non-traditional area of offering packages and policies to relocate people on much shorter stints. So we saw the rise in rotators, in commuters, in business travelers. And then there can't be any sort of conversation without, of course, touching on AI. And we saw a big drive of AI-powered tech solutions to really enhance the overall employee experience and look to streamline program management for mobility teams as a whole. So that was kind of where we were this time last year. And I think it's fair to say a number of those themes continue in 2026 and beyond, especially in the area of workplace and workforce trends continuing to be impacted by AI. And one interesting fact that Gartner shares is that CEOs still expect AI-fueled growth, but they say that only 1 in 50 AI investments are truly transformational, and only 1 in 5 shows measurable return on investment. But meanwhile, we know that talent still has to move. We need to mobilize global talent to get to the projects, to the markets, and of course, cross-border. So whilst the business continues to grapple with AI productivity returns, global mobility teams and leaders still need to be very firmly invested in the mobilization of global talent for their business.
It's never been truer that organizations and mobility teams are being asked to do more with less, but we'll unpack what this really means for global mobility in 2026 and beyond, redeploying skills at speed, how AI can be used in mobility programs, and proving ROI. And we'll leave the audience, you listeners, with a handful of practical strategies that you can use to enhance your mobility program.
So I think in terms of introducing our next session, there was a really big line that caught our eye, and this was about the AI messy middle meeting mobility, and really kind of unpacking that to explore why AI hasn't yet simplified global talent mobility and what we see going to be happening in the year ahead. So with that, Kate, what has happened over time with the AI evolution?
Well, it's true to say that AI is evolving at pace, but it's really not happening as quickly as some had anticipated. And we're on a journey. We've shifted already from basic chatbots that could be used as a web interface, maybe a little bit annoying and frustrating sometimes. In today's world, many people are working with co-pilots, and these mostly serve to improve individual productivity by generating content in response to user prompts. The next phase we'll move into will be agentic AI, where technology delivers multi-step workflows, and finally, autonomous agentic systems and workforces, where agents will interact together with other agents autonomously. And Hannah, interesting thought, maybe our agents next year will work to develop this podcast. But
wow, so almost our doppelgangers working together, Kate.
We can only dream. But because we're on this journey, and because it is a journey, there have been layoffs due to AI. A lot of organizations have also underhired at the early career and graduate levels. And this will continue to occur because the use cases for AI haven't really come to fruition yet. Gartner's 2026 report says that firms will need to rehire for these roles. And so the call out for workforce mobility leaders is to be prepared to support where you can to create value on this rehire initiative. But Hannah, when we think about AI, there's great implications for the workforce of the future. What do you think those are?
Great question, Kate. And I think, as always, we read really widely in advisory. And there's a guy, a consultant called Dave Ulrich, and he's one of the leading authorities in the HR world. And he talks about talent advantage and being the product of artificial intelligence combined with human ingenuity. And he says that AI amplifies information, efficiency, and scale, whilst human ingenuity really extends to all of those things that AI just can't do today. And this is in the space of judgment, creativity, empathy, ethics, and imagination. And it's these attributes that really turn information into value. So the impact comes from how they work together, but not necessarily stacking them side by side. And I think other interesting data point, Kate, is that McKinsey suggests that up to 30 hours could be automated across workforce by 2030. Now, that's just 4 years away, and they're sort of saying that this is the midpoint scenario. So really, value that organizations are looking to generate really does depend on their reskilling and redeployment approach, not just in the headcount cut space. And I think another important area, we always look as shared to the big consultants, but our kind of if you want, aggregation of looking at the trends for the year ahead always starts with Davos. What are the world leaders and the government leaders coming together in Davos in January, looking to put on their global agenda for key initiatives and priorities to address? And interestingly, one of the key bullets that certainly corporate leaders was calling out is the need for continued investment in people. And I think as we continue to see the acceleration of AI, as you neatly outlined just earlier, this really then does extend into organizational design and how functions need to be almost reprocessed from a workflow perspective to ensure that humans and the agentic AI tools are working in harmony. And this really is to avoid jobless growth, and it is going to continue to be a critical imperative I see, not just for the year ahead, but for years to come, over certainly the next 3 to 5 years. So, Kate, what's your thought on this kind of interplay of redeploy versus replace versus reduction in headcount as part of overall people strategies that organizations are looking to work towards in 2026? All of the levers will need to be supported through a workforce mobilization plan or framework. So what are kind of your thoughts on how companies, organizations are going to approach this?
Okay, well, super interesting and really good to know. I think that the leaders of all the global businesses are really thinking about investing in people, and that really is top of mind in terms of their strategies going forward. In terms of mobilizing talent, what I would say one area of focus for mobility teams in 2026 is really to think through how they can be involved in workforce planning strategies and how they can collaborate with their workforce management teams to support overall business objectives. So this, in essence, will mean creating a stronger partnership with the global talent group. And that will help, I think, with the second area of focus, which is being involved in workforce planning as early as you can be. Mobility leaders have, since the dawn of time, wanted to be more involved and brought in earlier. And this is a golden opportunity for them, I think, to start to really engage in those conversations. As I mentioned, AI maturity hasn't really delivered the ROI as quickly as CEOs were led to believe. And so headcount losses mean that people need to be rehired to ensure business continuity. And that might need an international or a domestic or some other kind of mobilization. So one example we've got of this is a software company that reduced their level 1 customer support team. They cut it out entirely, assuming that large language models would be able to fully support the workload. Just 9 months later, they reopened human positions in the organizations and used short-term domestic gigs of 30 to 90 days and virtual cross-border assignments to backfill those roles whilst they were training internal agentic AI help desks. So really the call out for mobility leaders is to be prepared, support where you can, and create value to support whatever the business initiative is. Hannah, yeah. So Hannah, where do you think AI plugs into mobility programs? What are some of the practical use cases that we've seen across our client base?
Yeah, great question. And I think this also applies to our own business, here at Server. Yeah. But through our conversations that we hold with clients, you can see that this is a big ticket agenda. We know that our clients and their global mobility programs have been under tremendous pressure to reduce cost. They themselves have seen a reduction in headcount across their own teams globally. And so I think there is, a definite intentional drive now to look at how AI can create efficiencies across global mobility programs as a whole. So we do see global mobility teams looking to create an agentic workforce. And just some of the examples of where agents are being built, designed and deployed, are very much in spaces where you can automate processes. So what are some of the, if you want more transactional work, that could actually have a series of agents built to actually conduct that work within the team? So in the areas of maybe balance sheet creation, letter of assignment, sponsorship letters, even down to payroll instructions, and other areas that need quite a lot of governance and tracking is also in things like, healthcare registration, healthcare cancellation, and the ongoing tracking of your active assignee or relocating mobile workforce that are utilizing some of these core benefits that we know it can be forgotten to switch them off. And of course, that adds additional cost burden. We also see very much in the space of compliance, so the tracking maybe of visa and immigration documents, things like passports, particularly things like dependent ages. Quite often we'll collect the age, but not necessarily the date of birth. And maybe looking at broader things like travel patterns too. And then there's the great, I think, use of where most of us on a personal basis day to day are actually using AI, which is in this summarization of documents. So things like maybe tax briefings, corporate housing leases or housing leases generally, immigration rulings, and of course that big traffic of communication going back and forth, maybe between a relocating employee, yourselves at the client level, and maybe other supplier stakeholders involved in that move. We know that those email threads can be very, very lengthy and time consuming to read, bottom up to the top. But I think for us, where we see particularly the greatest level of value coming is very much in that data analytics and insight space. So not just around program utilization, how many people are you moving on an annual basis? Where are they moving from and to? I think it's now elevating it much more into talent flows. So where is your talent flowing? Where is it flowing intra-border, cross-border, domestically, internationally? And what is the overall kind of, active assignee population maybe doing at post? What are the job profiles, the roles that they're holding? So we're going to see that a lot more insights coming out of the data. And then I think from an employee perspective, just shifting gears away from the mobility program as a whole, it's really sort of saying, well, what are some of the tools maybe that employees can use? Well, we do know that many of our clients have integrated and implemented tools like ServiceNow. And this does allow at-point self-service access to be able to query in the moment, maybe updates or insight on actual policy information, or maybe it's just general relocation and expense queries, as well as also being able to leverage potentially new networking platforms to help the mobile employees and their dependents assimilate quicker and faster into their new host location. So I think a call to action here is really about ensuring that when you are implementing new tools in the AI space, looking to create an agentic workforce, what are the checkpoints that you're also creating? It's great to create agents, but whilst we might be looking at the inputs, where are the checkpoints for the outputs from the new tools? And I think this is where we're sort of seeing the need for humans to still be very much involved in those processes, to act almost as a sign-off for certain key points that do need to be checked for compliance reasons. So we kind of see that AI will change how we work, but we still strongly feel that mobility is going to influence where the skills go and also how fast they get there. So maybe now, Kate, let's shift gears again and take a look at cultural and well-being aspects, and certainly some of the risks that are starting to present now for mobile talent.
And it's a really interesting topic, Hannah, because employee well-being started to appear on CHRO's agenda probably last year in 2025, and they are having to mitigate the cognitive and psychological risks of persistent AI use. So there's definitely an interplay with what we were talking about a moment ago about AI technology. But of course, for assignees and anybody who is relocating to a new market, the risk can really be augmented because they are in a new location. They don't have their traditional network of support people that they're used to dealing with. They're working in different time zones, new systems, new job, new home, and there's a pressure to settle in and assimilate quickly and perform in their new role. There's a body of work that we've done to really support clients who are looking to us to weave wellbeing support into their programs. And when I talk about wellbeing, it's kind of in the broadest sense of financial, physical, mental, belonging, having a purpose, and interpersonal components of the well-being wheel, if you like. The other area I think is culture dissonance, and this is something that came up in the 2026 Gartner report, isn't it, Hannah? Do you want to mention a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, so cultural dissonance are kind of some new language now that we're starting to come across, and a new theme really that's starting to present. And in essence, really, in very simple terms, many companies now today are asking employees to do more with less. And I think we've seen that as a theme, particularly across global mobility as a whole. But cultural dissonance happens when more for less is also being asked without clearly outline the expectations from employees. And what's happening is employees are noticing. They're seeing this top-down performance pressure, and it's leading to profound cultural dissonance within organizations where the stated culture no longer reflects the realities of the employee's everyday experience. So it's this widening gap between maybe the values, the vision, the mission, the purpose of the organization that's laying the foundation for the organization, but that's not matching me and my actual reality of doing my work in the business day to day. So as a result, the call out here is that performance, engagement, and brand loyalty can really drop for these organizations. So culture can and should evolve to meet the new realities of the current work environment. And in essence, really, employees need to know what they're signing up for. And this, we feel, is going to have a direct correlation, especially for global mobile talent, because we feel that the messaging for this group needs to be even more impactful and strong, just to make sure that you're managing their expectations right from the start in terms of what the reality is that they're going to meet in their new host locations. So, Kate, what are some practical actions that mobility leaders can take up and deliver in this space?
Hannah, I'm glad you asked that question. And I think there's a few simple actions that organizations can take. The first of those would be to create a mobility employee value proposition, EVP. So this document or piece of work might be just an overview of what employees are going to be getting with regards to their moves, the benefits that they might receive, whether those are relocation benefits or overall, projective aspirational outcomes over their career, combined with what is expected for the role and the specific role that they're going to perform in the new location. So that would be my first call out. And then my second would be to start to embed well-being guidance across the mobility program, because what well-being is a concern for the entire workforce, but the benefits that you have for your general force will be different and may not always be fit for purpose for your mobile population.
That's great. That's great insight, Kate. So if culture and quality are the guardrails, skills are the engine, let's talk supply, demand, and how mobility becomes internal first. What are your thoughts on that, Kate?
Yeah, so an interesting fact is that 1 in 10 open roles in organizations is filled by internal candidates. Just 1 in 10. Hiring managers say that it's easier to hire externally than internally. So there's really a long way to go before mobility becomes internal first. And you were touching on it before, Hannah, in terms of the types of different mobility. And I think we would categorize or identify 4 different types of global and domestic mobility. The first of those are the traditional LTA and STA, corporate dictated, mandated moves that have been or were traditionally the bread and butter of mobility teams. The second is this growing area of non-traditional move types, extended business travelers, commuters, virtual rotation, gig assignments, and so forth. Some mobility teams are involved in managing those mobility types. Then thirdly, there's internal mobility. So this would be the posting of open roles within the organization and internal candidate matching to those roles. That process is typically managed by talent and HR, and 10%, only 10%, as I mentioned before, of open roles are filled with internal talent.
Kate, does that therefore mean that 90% of open roles are therefore being filled through talent acquisition to external hires?
It does, yeah. And when you think about the advantages of hiring internally in terms of, corporate knowledge and culture and ramp up time and the cost of hiring externally as well, it's in businesses' interests to really promote internal mobility. And so the fourth category of mobility population are the external hires. So these are external candidates that might be relocated domestically or internationally. And 44% of internal talent find it easier to source a new role externally. And 51% of hiring managers find it easier to source candidates externally, according to Randstad.
Wow.
Really, really astonishing figures, I think. And traditionally, GM teams they've been involved in traditional assignments. Sometimes they've been involved in external or internal hires. But the more forward-thinking GM teams are really starting to think about all four categories of mobile talent and identify where their skills, their knowledge, and supplier relationships can support the workforce agenda. It's a bit of a land grab. So how can or should mobility support the global talent agenda, and how can it expand its remit to support all areas of global talent flow? I think the reason that question is important is that we're seeing the rise of talent intelligence platforms. And Hannah, do you want to describe for our audience what a talent intelligence platform is and how they're starting to support organizations today?
Yeah, sure, Kate. And I think this is a sort of really important trend that we're seeing more of now. And I think we've got to back up. Last year in the Gartner survey of CEOs, a top 3 priority for CEO is very much in the sphere of global workforce. The things keeping CEOs awake at night fundamentally are: do we have enough people? Do we have the right skills and talent? Are the skills and talent in the right places? And in order to ensure that you have the right talent to fit your growth projects, your business priorities, it's really this piece about being able to have visibility of your global workforce and then being able to match your global workforce with all the forthcoming open roles that need to support your growth initiatives for the future. So talent intelligence platforms have been propelled through a shift from traditional HR structures, where organizations now are moving into strategic workforce management and planning practices. And this is all in the effort to become a skills-first business. And according to Korn Ferry, 85 million roles will go unfilled by 2030 due to skills mismatching. And 23% of roles that exist today are predicted not to exist within 4 years' time. So this kind of expedites the challenge and the fear that CEOs have around global workforce generally. So the question is then, how do you get the skills, the capabilities, the competences of your global workforce to be visible, to support and enable stronger outcomes for organizations, just as you outlined earlier, Kate? if businesses are reliant on 90% of new talent having to come in externally, because you just can't have this matching internally of great talent with the new open roles, there's a real problem, because we know that to hire external talent is really, really expensive. But worse still, if the stats are backing up to say that 44% of global talent find it easier to go and look for a role externally, this is another major problem for employers, because typically it's the hypos, the high potentials, they're leaving the business to go actually charge their career in a different direction with a different employer. So what we've seen the rise of are these talent intelligence platforms. And what these are fundamentally are underpinning the ability for an employer or global organization to create an internal talent marketplace. And this fundamentally enables employees to create profiles, kind of upload their skills, their capabilities, everything that they've also invested in their learning management systems internally within their employer. They're able to sort of push their profile out to say, I am open to other opportunities. Here is where I'd like my career to navigate. And then the talent intelligence platform then actually does the pairing and the matching to get best outcomes, not just for the employees, many of which are looking for more aspirational careers rather than the linear careers, more what we call now squiggle careers, looking for greater variety. But also importantly for the business is to have strong productivity outcomes from matching. So this is really employee preference and aspiration plus enterprise guidance to really balance employer productivity with employee satisfaction. And this, as I shared, is down to a shift, particularly with Gen Zs, not wanting to pursue the linear career ladder, many of which baby boomers, Gen Xs have always aspired for, that linear career where you're going promotion after promotion after promotion. The Gen Zs and some of the younger millennials are just not wanting to lead their careers in that way. So there's a term now called the squiggle career, where actually what organizations are seeing is that this group of talent actually prefer to have a variety of experiences, be it internationally, domestically, or in other parts of the business, or maybe across different business entities, just to learn more and have a variety of experiences from that employer. And of course, as shared, this does now remove the over-reliance on talent acquisition, because if you have a stronger outcome of matching talent of, say, just 1 in 10 or just getting 10% matches of all open roles within your business, if you can even shift that, say, to 20%, 30%, you're making huge savings, but you're also looking to create stronger barriers to exit for your current talent. And so it now reduces this over-reliance on talent acquisitions to bring in external talent to fill currently 90% of all open roles. So I think the key question here is, well, what's all the linkage to mobility? What does this mean for workforce mobility? Well, for global enterprises, this means this shift, as we have seen with mobility programs, into creating maybe more innovative, shorter term domestic or international experiences for global talent. So now we're seeing, as you shared earlier, Kate, this piece around non-traditional mobility policies really coming to the fore and replacing more of the traditional policies. So we're seeing a rise in short-term gigs and sprints, an increase of business traveller and extended business traveller, and even actually a rise in some of the shorter-term policies that our clients actually have. And this is all about supporting and enabling a stronger talent internal marketplace, and then tying all of that to critical capability roadmaps that certainly leaders need to see in terms of this deployment of their global talent to the right locations at the right time with the right skills. So, Kate, what would be a practical call out for mobility teams as to how they can support this internal talent marketplace?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think I'd call out two areas really. One of which will be within the remit of the mobility teams, and one is more focused on the hiring managers or the people leaders of organizations. So the first is for mobility teams, and I'd say, quite often mobility policies will say that you have to have had 12 months of employment to qualify for a mobilization. Maybe that rule could be loosened. Maybe you can give visibility to employees much earlier in their careers to the opportunities that are open. And the second area really is, as I mentioned, for people leaders. One as a mobility practitioner, I think one of the things that you can see is that people want to hide their talent. It's not in it's people leaders want to hide their talent. They don't want to release their talent to other parts of the business because it's just not in their interests. But it is in the interests of the broader organization. And I think that would be my other call out. And mobility teams do have a role to play in that. They can influence and encourage people leaders to change their behaviors and their attitudes, but it's not all within their gift. Let's zoom back out, Hannah, and look at how mobility can be framed as a business growth lever and how mobility teams can help to prove that it is a lever for business growth.
Yeah, that's a good topic area to focus on, Kate. And I think when we talk about return on investment or ROI in global mobility, we're really talking about impact. What's the impact that particular relocation or assignment has made in terms of the overall cost and investment? And it's really this shift from seeing mobility as a cost on a balance sheet to really recognizing it as a strategic investment that drives business growth. And mobility programs, as we know, support so much more than just the enablement of talent moving cross-border. It also enables talent development. It also enables improved retention. It boosts productivity. But importantly as well for businesses from an outcome perspective, it boosts organizations' ability to expand into new markets. So the challenge is that many mobility teams really struggle to prove this value and also kind of discern what it really means. As we know, data can be really fragmented. And what needs to happen is alignment within HR talent teams. That doesn't always happen, and it can be inconsistent. So without clear metrics, mobility risks really being left out of a lot of these strategic conversations where value is at the heart as a core driver and outcome. So that's really where ROI for mobility comes in, by linking mobility spend to outcomes like revenue growth, leadership readiness, and employee progression. And mobility leaders need to be able to clearly show how their programs support wider business goals. And historic data and real world case studies are very, very powerful tools here. And such examples really are international assignments that kind of close that skills gap or accelerates promotions. And we've had, a really interesting talk with a client who would love the ability to be able to track and monitor all of those that have been on a mobile assignment, be it domestically or internationally, and actually compare career trajectory and promotion, if you want, velocity against those employees that haven't had that opportunity or desire even to go on some form of mobile experience. And so this is really where partners like Server can help and can help you with mobility programs overall. And this is really in the context of building practical ROI frameworks where we can automate data collection, turn real mobility insights into clear executive-ready reporting. And the result really is smarter investment decisions and stronger cross-functional collaboration and mobility programs that can just continuously improve and deliver measurable value. And ultimately, ROI then will help mobility earn its place as a strategic driver, not just of movement and movement of global talent and people, but also importantly for CEOs for growth.
And I'm going to back that up with a couple of stats, Hannah. EY recently reported that organizations with an evolved mobility program, so mobility program that is aligned to talent and might be tech enabled, those kinds of programs are twice as likely to achieve 10% revenue growth. They see that mobility boosts retention and time to fill for senior roles. And at the same time, Vialto has said that most programs still don't track post-assignment outcomes. So they're missing the opportunity, and they're missing the opportunity really to build the analytics backbone and create a standard KPI pack that, just as you said, can really demonstrate the proof points to executive leaders. Well, Hannah, speaking of KPIs, which are the metrics that you would track?
Well, good question. So I think these need to be metrics that can be tracked both at the employee and at the business level. And I think there is a rising kind of interest in looking at promotion rates, as I shared with that client conversation we had internally around how do you actually demonstrate the value that mobility brings in terms of what we call accelerated or promotion velocity. So I think promotion rate is a really interesting metric to take a look at for your mobile populations versus maybe those that haven't or don't desire any form of international or domestic experience. I think there's another key metric here around retention and retention rates generally, not just for those on assignment, but for those that have had assignment, maybe come back and now assimilated back into another country or back in their home. And I think there's another piece around performance. What is the performance quota or levels of those that are on or had a mobile experience, maybe versus non-mobile peers? And also looking at metrics within the global business around the time taken to fill open roles. I think that's another important metric. The longer a role is open, clearly you're not lining up either your high potential or the talent and skills required to fill those roles. And then looking at the location where maybe you've had relocating global talent either go in and work there. It's really looking at what did that role deliver, looking at the revenue, looking at the growth milestones, have they been achieved, and were they enabled through having deployed mobile talent there? So, Kate, on this theme, what comes first in terms of data integration? Because everything we're talking about really is the continued rise of platforms, across their specialism. So in terms of looking at integrating data, particularly for global HR, global people functions, where do we kind of go next? Is it HRIS payroll data together? Is it HRIS immigration and mobility? Where do you see this tracking, and what's kind of the big win to be had here?
So if we're talking about integrations and critically, if money's no object and resources no object, I would want to stitch together the HRIS travel and mobility platforms. And I think this combination really connects the people data with travel activity and mobility program governance. Together, they will create a unified view of where your employees are, where they should be, and what actions need to be taken to keep the organization compliant and your employees supported. It gives you some real practical insights as well. So the real-time location and visibility for risk management purposes. It helps with duty of care and employee safety, which has become prominent in the times of war and natural disasters. Line of sight to emerging mobilization needs that might need support from a workforce planning perspective. And it also gives you the ability to track retention, speed of promotion, performance appraisals, and all of those good things, Hannah, that you were mentioning before for mobile versus non-mobile employees. So we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered risks. We've covered ROI. Let's land the plane, Hannah, with plays for the remainder of 2026. What would be your quick or not so quick wins for our audience today?
Well, okay, so I know we've covered a lot of ground. So in summary, I think some of the key takeaways really are establish and understand your organization's global talent strategy. Understand, do you have internal talent marketplaces set up that support guided matching of, current existing talent with open roles? Get to know and develop your relationships with leaders across global talent and talent acquisition. Do you know who your talent partners are? Do you know what their strategy, their mission is? And maybe consult and co-develop solutions with them to meet the compliance of mobilizing external hires into the business. We know that many of these external hires can be hired either as local foreign hires or new international relocation hires into a new geography for your business. I think another piece that we've talked about is this speed and kind of a sense of urgency around needing to evolve AI. And I think it really is for GM leaders the call out here to be ready, to be on alert, to make sure that your programs can respond timely to urgent business requests, particularly in the realm of redeployment or the rehire of new talent back into the business. I think the other call out here is also ensuring that you've got what we call good AI quality gates. And this is really defining where AI is currently operating or to operate across your mobility workflows, especially in the compliance space. You are still going to need some degree of human sign off, particularly for tax, immigration, or all compliance outputs. We also touched on creating a mobility EVP or employee value proposition for mobile employees. And this really can be as simple as a one pager, but I think it really is important in an era of potential growing cultural dissonance across global organizations, as we discussed earlier. It's really important to set the expectations of maybe the shift that relocating employee is going to find from working in one geography in another or a completely different entity or new office setup environment, just to ensure that you mitigate any form of risk again, with regards to cultural dissonance. That also then rolls neatly into wellbeing guidance. We saw just this week, Kate, you and I were discussing the new EY report that's come out to sort of demonstrate that well-being has never been more important for employees in the workspace, especially around the subject of loneliness, with many sadly now Gen Zs and some millennials reporting that they don't even have a human conversation during the week. And this is just driving more and more loneliness. And many of these Gen Zs and millennials are turning to chatbots to have conversations with. I mean, it's just unreal when you kind of unpack this. So I do think that there is an extended duty of care in the age of evolving AI and the tools that organizations are providing to their people. And I think the call out here is we know that those relocating on some form of mobile assignment are more vulnerable than others, just with the magnitude of actually going through the assignment lifecycle stages. So there really is a big shout out here for wellbeing guidance. And then I think just neatly to wrap, Kate, this piece around return on investment, we've coined it ROI Blueprint 1. And this is now about the good integration of HRIS systems as a whole. So looking at your HRIS system and how it can further integrate with maybe payroll, immigration, your global mobility data, and ongoing performance data, maybe learning management system data, really to track retention, promotion, velocity, time to fill open roles, and especially what that all means for mobile talent. So I think that's the key summary of everything that we've covered with each other today, Kate.
So that's 7 takeaways, if I counted them correctly, for our listeners. But Hannah, if there's one message that you wanted talent and mobility leaders to take away from this conversation as they prepare for the remainder of 2026, what would it be?
Well, that's a good one, Kate. I think it comes down to this. Skills move value and mobility moves skills. So in 2026, the winners redeploy fast. They measure outcomes and importantly, they protect culture and quality. So that brings us to the end of today's discussion on top talent trends shaping 2026 for mobility leaders and their programs. It's been a pleasure, Kate, unpacking these insights with you.
And thank you, Hannah, and thank you to our listeners for joining us on this New Year edition of Server Soundbites. If you enjoyed our show, please click subscribe and share, and be sure to come back next time for more conversations designed to connect, inform, educate, and hopefully entertain. We look forward to having you with us again soon.